I realised that a really useful thing to do would be to kind of situate myself, tell you like where I am in my career. That's what I mean by that. Tell you where I am in my career. So for the last, few years, up until last year, I got most of my income through not doing art stuff. I used my actually employable skill, which is environmental consultancy, weirdly. To live off and also save up money, so that when I decided, well, I'm going to live off this art thing, I'd have a bit of a buffer zone. So in 2013-14, my guess is I made about £5,000 off of doing art. About 2014-15. I'm doing some numbers here because we haven't had many numbers and we're talking about money, and I think it's important that you hear some numbers. In 2014-15, I think I probably made about £10,000 off my art, so I thought, well, maybe this is time to go full-time and see if I can sort of live off it, earn enough to live off it. And this year, my aim for myself is to make about £14,000 off doing it. That's pathetic. That's not really enough to live off, and I don't think I'm going to make it either. I'm not really expecting to. That's why I saved up. Beg your pardon? No, for 2015-16. That's no. So no, I hit my 10,000 for last year, but thank you for the vote of confidence. The living wage in the UK is something like £16,500. It's more in London. It's much more in London. I can't remember exactly how much, but outside of London, which is where I am, because it's affordable. The living wage is about £16,500, and the average wage is about £24,000 last time I looked at it. Alright, so my aim for myself this year is to make £14,000. I can live off that. I live very, very frugally. I have by choice. I don't think you should have to live that frugally, but I happen to. That's my aim for myself, and I don't think I'm going to make it. I think I've got a chance of making it in 2016-17, but I saved up for a while to try and make that possible. Now, so the reason I'm telling you all of that is kind of so you know who I am. I'm an artist near the beginning of their career. I'm trying to live entirely off of art, and that's quite difficult. I don't have like an established career pattern, and I don't have an established income. And I'm making it up as I go along, and I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to do it. So that's where I'm at, and that's the kind of level I'm at with all of you. So I thought that might be helpful. And this talk is called "Art is Already a Weird Way to Make Money, so get weirder." I'll just leave that there. That's the slide I added. So like, how many of you are students right now? Okay, and how many of you are like in the first 2-3 years of coming out with like an art degree? So that was about a quarter students, right? Maybe a quarter of that. And so the rest of you, is everybody else working? Is anybody not working as an artist? Good job. It's much more. Oh wow, that was like a third of you, right? Okay, so the artists here, most of you are either at school or have left school recently. Does anyone think they're going to make more than that in like the next 3 years? Who's working as an artist right now? Does anybody think they're going to make more than that? Okay. Right, yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, that's not good, that's terrible. But you're being realistic, that's a good start for surviving. And if you're being realistic about how shit it is, then maybe you'll work to change it. That'd be nice. Alright, so that's context, that's who you are, that's who I am. I'm near the beginning of my career. I don't really have enough money to live off, but I'm sort of getting there. Okay. I'm a performer rather than a visual artist, and a writer rather than a visual artist, so I'm kind of coming at this from a live art perspective, but I hope that will be useful to you. It's called Art is a Weird Way of Making Money, so get weirder, because I'm going to, in a little bit, after setting some more problems, tell you about 2 weird ways I've tried to make money, and what the good things and the bad things about that are. That's the talk. Well, 3 problems about trying to make a living, trying to earn money as an artist right now. Problem number one, precarity. They've got big names. Problem number one, precarity. By precarity, I mean an economy where lots of people don't have a job. An economy where having a career for life, where you're like waged for most of your life, doesn't happen anymore. An economy where lots of you are freelancers, where you're not going to be employed by institutions, where artists don't have jobs, and also people working at the base level of the service sector don't have jobs either. Don't have contracts that guarantee. Have 0 hours contracts, right? Working in call centres and supermarkets, that's precarious work because you're not guaranteed any hours and you don't really get any employment benefits, and your contracts are appalling when they're there. That's the state that, judging by kind of the age of a lot of you here and me, that's the sort of state we're living in. When we're thinking about earning money, we're barely thinking about having a job. All right, we're thinking about hustling it. We're thinking about trying to get money from here, and money from there, and money from there, and money from there, because there aren't any jobs for us, and it's only getting worse. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, corporatization. And by that I mean the power in our society, this country, and the countries it belongs with, the power in our society is sort of shifting from the state to the corporation. That's where the power is shifting towards. That's who gets to decide how society is working and how the money in society is allocated. And what that means for us is that how decisions are made is being shifted from a society nominally based on voting to a society nominally based on shareholders' meetings, neither of which are actually particularly good forms of democracy, and neither of which are actually what's happening. But nominally, we're shifting from a society where voting decides how a country is run to a society where shareholders' meetings and lobbying decides how a country is run. It's obvious that that's not particularly good news for those of us at the bottom of the pile. Problem number three for artists trying to make a living now, dematerialization, by which I mean the internet, basically. I mean that people are less interested in buying stuff, buying objects. That objects mostly have a sort of elite status, a luxury status, that most of us consume most of our culture, which is the product of art, that most of us consume most of our culture online, digitally. And most of the time we aren't paying for it. I torrent films, I steal films, it's not actually theft. I torrent films, I torrent games. Sometimes I torrent books, although I do that less. Like, whether it's being given to us for free, I stream my music, I don't steal that. I stream my music, but I rarely buy an album. I think I spent about £50 on music last year because I can't really afford it. So the product that artists are creating is dematerialized, and because it's dematerialized, it's harder to make any money off it. And we're living on the internet, and we haven't really figured out how to make money off that, apart from selling adverts. Yeah, so that's quite difficult if you're an artist and you're producing culture. That's going to be, so for some of you working as visual artists, that's not, if you manage to get yourself into like the luxury visual art bit where you're selling like things that actually exist, if you can get yourself there, and only a few of you are going to be able to do that because it's an elite market, good on you. You're going to kind of rise above that. The rest of you are going to have to grapple with it. If you're working in live art, like I am, you're already dealing with like immaterial stuff, and you find it very exciting, even if you can't make a living off it. So those are my three problems of like how are you going to make money as artists right now. And you could pile all of those problems together: precarity, corporatization, and dematerialization. And you could call that neoliberalism, which is the economic system that we're in. So, given that situation, and given me trying to make enough money to live off, here are two weird ways that I try to make money off live art that more or less succeeded or are succeeding. And by weird way, I mean a way that isn't a job, and that isn't applying for funding, and that isn't getting a commission. Because those are the three main ways that we used to be able to get money as artists. And they are still the main ways that we can get money, but with money shifting from state to corporation, there's going to be less funding available, and stuff like that. And with precarity, there are fewer jobs, so there aren't going to be as many jobs and commissions. and funding that you can go for, so we need to find other weird ways of surviving, is my point. So weird way number one, live art auction. So this was an event called Auction Achtung, which was organised mainly by two UK artists called Sarah Zoltash and Adam Young, who are fantastic people. It was physically in Berlin and digitally on eBay. It had about 20 different artists, including me, auctioning immaterial stuff, auctioning performance, or action, or intervention, or stuff that wasn't objects. We were trying to persuade people to buy in an auction stuff that wasn't objects. And it was a live auction, so we were auctioning like a performance by Sarah Zoltash. We were auctioning, I think, Tom Marshman doing whatever you said for 10 minutes, or stuff like that. We were auctioning me building a cardboard model and then blowing it up, which is the sort of art that I like to get up to sometimes. So we were auctioning immaterial stuff in like a warehouse in Berlin. It's quite fun. We were also auctioning it on eBay at the same time. So there was like an eBay page of me and my project, which was called I Want to Blow Up a Palace Hollywood House, because I did. I didn't actually blow it up, I wanted to, that's what I did. There was a page that was like, Harry's going to build a cardboard model and blow it up. Do you want to buy the explosion? Nobody on eBay did, but I did actually succeed in selling the explosion, which is what I was auctioning. I was auctioning the explosion and the moral and political consequences of the explosion. And they were bought by an academic and curator in Berlin called Florian Flegel, who thought this was a lovely idea. So when the explosion actually happened, which it did, at the Spill Festival performance, he owned that moment, and he paid me €100 and all the expenses, which was the most important thing because it's quite expensive to blow things up. So he paid me €100 and all the expenses, and in return he owned the explosion, and I packaged up all the remnants of the explosion and put them in a box. And when I visited Berlin, I met him in a pub in the art district and gave him the box and signed an ownership certificate. So he has a material object as well, but that was just a little bit of luck. So that's one weird way of making money. It paid me a tiny bit for my time. It made sure that I got to do a really odd art thing, which I also got a tiny bit of public funding for, which helped. And it was an interesting thing to do. So the good stuff about that, in terms of trying to auction off a performance, and I happened to find a supportive buyer, somebody who really liked the project, who was willing to give me extra money to do the project, and who cared about the project actually happening. And that's a really significant thing for an artist, because so often you're on your own, and so often you don't feel like you have any kind of emotional or social support. And so going through this process of auction found me that in a really interesting way. That made the project viable. I would have done it anyway, to be honest, but it was nice not to be out of pocket on it, and it was nice to get a little bit of money for my time as well. More importantly than that, it's built a relationship with a curator and academic in Berlin, and I'm hoping that that's going to bear fruit, because now he's more broadly interested in my work. He's looking for opportunities for me in Berlin. He owns an object of mine, and this is fascinating to me. He owns an explosion of mine, because I don't come from a visual art background, so the whole idea of like people owning my stuff and having objects that are sort of my stuff just doesn't occur to me. So this is quite an exciting thing for me, that he has like an explosion and an object that he has a stake in and wants to build a relationship about. And then the other good thing is that I got to do something a bit weird, which is that the auction itself was kind of an art project, because I auctioned an explosion, and because I auctioned the moral consequences of an explosion. And so when you try and find money in weird ways, you often get to do sort of weird bits of art while you're doing it, and that, for us, has a lot of value. But it was loads of work for Adam and Sarah, who I don't really think got paid for it. It was loads and loads of work. Not actually that many of the artists sold their projects, because we were in a warehouse in Berlin, and most of the audience were also artists who have no money. So the big challenge really to make a project like that viable is like, how do you get the rich people to come? Because they exist, and we need their money. So how do we get them to come to it? And they love weird art things, because it makes them think they're cutting edge and not like on the top of the heap. So they love weird art things, We want their money. How do we get them to come in and give us their money? So if this model is pursued, like figuring out how to get the rich people in is important. But the problem is, when you get the rich people in, they always take over and they always ruin it, because that's what rich people do, they ruin things. It is. They exploit it. So how do you get their money without giving them too much control over your project? And that's a really challenging question when you're trying to get rich people's money. So those are my buts on auctioning. So we're doing number 2, crowd patronage. So this is my profile on a crowdfunding page called Patreon, which launched two and a half weeks ago, I think. Not the website. My page on it launched 2.5 weeks ago. And Patreon was set up by some musicians who released a lot of videos on YouTube and wanted to find a way of monetizing that, getting money from that wasn't just whacking adverts on it. So they had lots of YouTube followers, they had lots of subscribers. The standard model for getting money off YouTube is just to sell advertising space, like it's the standard model for loads of communication platforms and for everything on the internet, but it's a kind of sucky way to make money. So they set up a new crowdfunding platform called Patreon. Now, it's not like Kickstarter or Crowdfunder or GoFundMe or any of those. You're not asking for money for a specific project, rather it's crowd-sourced patronage. So you're saying, hello world, would you like to give me, say, $1 a month, or $2 a month, or $5 a month, whatever you want, and everybody else will give me $1 a month, and that might add up to something that might contribute to my income. So you're getting a regular income from a whole bunch of people. So it's like it's crowd patronage. Rather than having one patron who gives you loads of money every month, you have lots of patrons who give you a little bit of money every month. It's been quite a successful platform for people whose artwork is natively internet. So webcomic artists are doing great off it. People who do YouTube commentary on games are doing really, really well off it. It's such a weird world. That is such a weird world. Musicians who have a large YouTube following are getting a lot of money off it. So I was looking at this, and I do some work in games, and I'm kind of game adjacent, like a lot of people. I do some work with the kind of game sector. So I was looking at this, and I thought, well, why don't I experiment and see if I can get people to do this for live art and for poetry, which nobody pays any money for. Why don't I see if I can get people to give me money for this thing, and also try and do it in the UK where it's less well known. I was kind of nervous about it because crowdfunding is a very kind of emotionally raw and vulnerable thing to be doing. Because you're asking, like, give me money, I'm an interesting person, give me money, and that's a horrible thing to have to do. So the way I persuaded myself to do it was by saying, this is an experiment, I don't know if it's going to work, and it's an experiment that kind of explores a potential funding model for lots of other artists. If I can make a go of this, then maybe other people can make a go of this as well. So it's only been going for 2.5 weeks, and I persuaded 11 people to give me money, which I think is quite good for 2.5 weeks. I think that's all right, so I've got $50 a month coming in. That's a start. I'm aiming for 100 within a couple of months. And my target that I really want to hit is 500 by the end of the year, because that would pay for like 2 days work, and I could make it free art, and that would be quite nice. So that's what I'm doing with that. Good stuff about that. The really good thing about Patreon, if you can get it to work, is it's regular income for you. Even if it's small income, it's a regular thing that you get in every month, and you know that's going to be there. So if you can get your rent paid on Patreon for you in like a precarious position, that's amazing, because it takes one worry of the many worries that you have off your shoulders. Another good thing about what I found about doing this, and there'll be diminishing returns on this, is that by kind of saying to the British live art community, I'm doing a Patreon, do you want to give me some money? It started up loads of conversations about money and art, which is my favourite thing to do. Actually, that's why I'm doing this talk, because I talk about money all the time, and half my work is about money in one way or another. So it's kicking off a lot of conversations, and some people hate it, and that's okay. Some people hate crowdfunding, some people hate the idea of crowd patronage, that's okay. We're having good discussions about it, I think that's important. Other good stuff, if you get Patreon to work, you have this quite connected, direct relationship with your audience. They're giving you a tiny bit of money, but they care about you, and you care about them. You want to give them good stuff, and you get to have conversations about your work, and you get to give people your work in a way that isn't just constantly like firing it out into an uncaring world and hoping that it lands somewhere good. Like I've got at least 11 people who really care about everything that I put out. And if you can get like 1,000 of those people, you're made for life. You really are. Like 1,000 fans who care about your work, that's the kind of classic number. You're sorted, that's all you need. And so building it that way is quite an interesting thing to be doing. Another good stuff about Patreon, this is something I really care about, and it's also not always popular, is that I really like releasing as much of my work as possible for free. I can't release it all for free, it's not viable at the moment, but I like where possible putting art out into the world, because that way weird art and interesting art can reach wider audiences, and it's not always constantly locked in concrete basements, right, where you're performing for 10 other live artists and everyone claps at the end, right? You get to get it out into the world in an interesting way. And I could talk a lot more about the model of giving stuff away for free and then asking for money, but people like Corey, Dr. Rao, and Amanda Palmer are much better at talking about it than me, so I won't. Okay, I don't know if I have had a slow start or not. Like, I feel quite good about 11 people in 2.5 weeks. It's not going to change the world, but it's changing my feelings a little bit, and I think it's going to build from there if I make a success out of it. Another but, so I work in really unpopular art forms. I work in performance art, and I work in poetry, and like, nobody likes those things. Well, some people do, you might, that's quite nice. But they're art forms that really don't have much of a following. They're not like games, right? God, if I wanted to make money, I do some stuff in the games sector, and I'm constantly like, why am I doing like weird art games? If I have the skills. If I just made computer games, I'd be made. Like, there's so much money in games right now. But I'm not. I'm making weird art stuff instead. So I'm doing unpopular art forms. That makes things like Patreon hard. Another problem with crowdfunding, even when it's a different crowdfunding model, and I'm guessing that some people in the room might have found this, is crowdfunding burnout. Not from, well, at two ends. If you have to do more than one crowdfunder in a couple of years, like, you're going to hate it, because it's emotionally grueling, like running those things. It's just awful. And also your audience is going to hate it as well. Like, people are already getting, it's only a few years into this whole Kickstarter crowdfunding thing, and people are already sick of getting asked for money all the time. Like, all their friends being like, put in £1 to my crowdfunder. It's rubbish, it sucks, it doesn't feel nice. So that's a bit of a problem, and something that I'm concerned about. Okay, and then, so that's not an insult, that's actually her name as an artist, is Amanda fucking Palmer, okay? So it's both meant to be like, yeah, Amanda fucking Palmer, it's also meant to be like, oh, man. Like, it's those things up, right? So if you don't know who she is, she's a musician and performance artist and used to be a human statue. She was half of the Dresden Dolls, and now she has her own solo music career. She's also the partner of Neil Gaiman, the comics artist and novelist. They're kind of like the old goth art super couple. They're like the Kanye, oh god, who's Kanye with now? I've forgotten. Sorry? They're the Kanye and Kim of like alternative art, right? Neil and Amanda, that's what they're like. Okay, so she does a lot of stuff about giving art away and asking people for money, and that's her whole shtick. And she just joined Patreon this week. Or launched her Patreon this week, and I'm shitting myself because I'm like, oh, I thought I was doing this cool little alternative thing, and then Amanda fucking Palmer comes in. But the reason that's actually like economically significant is a pattern that we found with other crowdfunders like Kickstarter, is that Kickstarter started as a way of people with no social capital, no cultural capital, no way of actually accessing large amounts of money, getting larger amounts of money into their weird project, right? And it was quite successful at doing that and getting a lot of strange artists and creators money for things that capture people's imagination. And that's still happening, but the bulk of Kickstarter now, and most of the attention in Kickstarter now, is like games companies like Double Fine and massive musicians, like Amanda Palmer, again, who had one of the most successful Kickstarters in history. People who have massive social and cultural capital already are attracting a lot of the money into crowdfunding, and the smaller stuff. Okay, so there's an argument here. Is having the big people in there, is any of that interest going to trickle down to the rest of us, like it doesn't in the wider economy? Or are they going to attract all the attention and take another possible source of income away from us? I don't know, but that's why she's up there, that's my bet. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end now because I've run 6 minutes over, but whatever, we'll run over, seems to be okay. So I'm coming to the end. Those are my 2 weird ways to make money. Big point about this. I like this slide. I'm quite pleased about this slide. So we're not going to get a wage anytime soon. Some of us might, if we're lucky, but most of us working as artists are not going to get a wage because we're in economically disastrous times, and it's really hard for anyone to find a job, let alone an artist. So if you actually want a wage, like if you actually want a livable income for most of your life, then the way to do that isn't just to like make your CV really good. It's also to be like part of the struggle for better workers' rights and like better wages and a better economic system. So like if you want to make a living income as an artist, join the union. That'd be a good thing to do. I'm a member of the Scottish Artists Union and the Industrial Works of the World because that's fun. They're 100 years old, great union. And so that's important. Join the union, join workers' rights campaigns and protests. Workers' rights are also women's rights and disability rights and migrant rights. That's all incredibly important. It's all tied in together in a benefit system that can keep you alive. So that's my like, it's a really shitty system that we're in, and if you want to live, don't just concentrate on your own career, have solidarity with each other as well. Final point, while we're doing that, because that's all about the future, and that's really hard to think about, like overturning an entire economic system, you need to survive, you need to look after yourselves, you need to find a way to live. It's totally okay to get a job that isn't art, right? You can work in a bar, it's more fun than filling out funding applications, it really, really is. So that's okay, but if you want to try and do this really stupid thing of like living off your art, you're going to need lots of diverse tactics to do that. You're going to need to find weird, unsustainable, strange ways of making money and keep coming up with new ones before they ruin them and share them with each other and teach each other how to do them, and then hopefully you'll have enough money to live off. Alright, that's me. Thanks.